All right, so welcome to the Public Safety Network. My name is TJ Kennedy. I'm one of the founders of the Public Safety Network, and I'm here with Jason Karp, as well as Chief Harlin McEwen. Chief Harlin McEwen has been in public safety for as long as any of us can remember, long before many of us were even police officers like myself. Chief Harlin McEwen was already a police chief once or twice over. Quick background on Chief McEwen. He has received most every honor related to communications from the International Associations of Chiefs of Police. He is a life member and has done extraordinary things. He spent 13 years as the Chief of Police for Cayuga Heights, New York. He also went on to be the Chief of Police for Ithaca, New York, and was the Deputy Assistant Director of the FBI. He spent more than 37 years as the Chairman of the IACP Communications and Technology Committee. And then not only that, he was the chair of the FirstNet Public Safety Advisory Council. And in that PSAC role, Chief Harlin McEwen and I got to work together every day and really understand what was the key efforts and needs of public safety across this country for a nationwide public safety broadband network. And it was great working with the chief because he could reach out and talk to police chiefs and key public safety leaders, fire, emergency medical services, emergency management, and across the entire sector of public safety in the whole country. And so welcome, Chief. We're glad to have you here today.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, and Chief, I would just say, we could literally devote this entire show to your CV, all in itself. It's, it's crazy impressive. And, on a personal note, we also got the opportunity to work together, throughout FirstNet. Over the last 6 years. It's been an honor, and we want to thank you for your service and really appreciate you coming on today and talking with us about some of the new trends and advancements in public safety technology.
Thanks, Jason.
So, Chief, it's interesting to look back and know what we went through to make this happen. And I think it's important for everybody to hear a little bit of the early history because not everybody knows it. And I think there's probably nobody better than you who can talk about it. But if you wouldn't mind, just for our audience out there, could you just give them a little bit of background on what happened in the efforts post 9/11 to go for a nationwide public safety network, the strong efforts to create the initial D-block efforts, and then moving that into creating what became the legislation for FirstNet, just at a high level?
Sure. Well, in the beginning, I think about 1995 is where a lot of this started, and it wasn't in looking at a new nationwide network. It was looking at the fact that the radio spectrum assigned to public safety, police, fire, EMS, was basically too narrow to be able to share documents and video and things of that nature. We needed to have some dedicated spectrum for that purpose. Secondly, the FCC, in its wisdom, to try to, what they felt, better manage spectrum allocations, decided to start narrowbanding the narrowband voice channels that we were using, which made sharing of documents and data almost impossible. So it was getting worse, and we needed spectrum. So that was what we were focused upon. And without going into a lot of detail, that eventually ended up in the Congress directing the FCC to allocate 24 megahertz of additional spectrum to public safety, half of which was going to be for data, and half would be additional narrowband voice. In those days, we weren't thinking about broadband wireless, we were thinking about wideband. And the channels were much better, were going to be much better than the narrowband voice channels we had, but that fairly quickly over 2 or 3 years evolved into broadband, which was, a big leap, improving things even further. As we began we developed the rules for the use of the 12 megahertz of the data portion of the spectrum. That was, by the way, that spectrum that was allocated was former television spectrum when the television stations were transforming from you know, into digital, and which were much narrower channels. So you know, you went from a wide analog channel into a very narrow digital channel. They didn't need as much spectrum. So some of that spectrum we got was from that opening in the way FCC did. So anyway, jump forward to around 2005, 6, and 7, when the FCC started working on how they were going to work with us on the data portion of this. Broadband became something that was being discussed. That eventually ended up in the public safety community forming what was known as the Public Safety Spectrum Trust. And that was a not-for-profit organization made up of 15 of the national public safety organizations. You know, the police chiefs, the fire chiefs, the sheriffs, APCO. We had the League of Cities, the Conference of Mayors, the national governors. It was a really well-rounded group. And it was our attempt to try to come up with a way to build some kind of a new nationwide broadband network. And that basically failed because we weren't able to get the attention of the Congress or other major investors to finance it. So that then jumped to the next step, and that was that we had 12 megahertz of public safety licensed spectrum, which was licensed at that time to the Public Safety Spectrum Trust, which I chaired. And they were going to auction off a different spectrum. The famous one was the D block, and that was 12 megahertz of spectrum right adjacent to the spectrum that we were already licensed to. We started advocating for assignment of that rather than to have it sold. It basically didn't go anyplace until finally, about in 2009, the major city police chiefs hosted a meeting of all the national public safety organizations, and we all agreed that we had to bring all the public safety organizations and the big seven. Big seven are the governors, the mayors, League of Cities, all of those. And we had to all be on the same page to get Congress to allocate that spectrum to us and to develop a strategy for a new nationwide public safety broadband network. And as you know, that took 3 more years. And in 2012, finally, after a lot of partisan bickering, I have to say, in Congress. I mean, the Republicans wanted to do it one way, Democrats wanted to do it a different way. We actually had a slightly different way. And so after a lot of give and take, and after, and we had difficulty, we finally got the Republicans and Democrats in the Congress more or less in agreement. And we were still waiting for the White House to endorse it and to support it if it was passed. Finally, that broke loose, and the law was passed. As you know, the president signed that on February 12th, of 2012. I became involved because the first chairman of it established and created this new First Responder Network Authority, now known as FirstNet. And that authority established how a new board of directors would be appointed. The Secretary of Commerce had that responsibility. She appointed Sam Ginn as the first chairman. He appointed me as the first chairman of the FirstNet Public Safety Advisory Committee. By the way, that was a required committee. That was in the law. It said that the FirstNet board would have to consult with that committee. Didn't say how the committee would be formed or anything. And so working with Sam and the board, we built the PSAC into what it is today. I think there's about 45 member organizations, very representative of people in the public safety and the local and state and federal government community. So that's kind of the history as to where we got. The next step was that the FirstNet board, and TJ, of course, you were there, Jason, you were there. The FirstNet board eventually issued a contract to AT&T to build and maintain this network. So I'm going to stop, excuse me, I'm going to stop there and say, okay, that's what got us to where we are today. I was there from the beginning, and it, you know, the vision of where we were going changed over those years. From year to year, the vision kept changing and kept advancing with new technology, new, you know, funding opportunities, all those kinds of things.
Well, I have to say it was an incredible, fun journey. And even though I was not around at the very, very beginning of some of the efforts back in the 90s, I was benefiting from your good work in those days as a firefighter and a paramedic and a police officer, and certainly leveraging the tools in the field. And as time went on and we understood what needed to get done, and certainly as we lobbied for what is now the FirstNet legislation from a perspective of industry and public safety, I think one of the great lessons learned from that, and you just highlighted it, but I'm not sure if everybody out there understands it, is the fact that everyone in public safety and state and local government, and even federal government, got together and said, we need to do this together. We need everyone in public safety across the country to work together for one common goal. And that was, you know, fully operable communications. And I purposely didn't say interoperable because it should just work, right? At the end of the day, police officers, firefighters, paramedics, others, they just want their communications to work. And I think that was somewhat of the holy grail of what we were hoping for. And to your point, you and I had a lot of these discussions early on. If you think about this, you know, FirstNet, we started staffing up in 2013. I remember only having about 3 employees in the very beginning, including myself, right? And we were quite small, and we grew that to about 450 employees and contractors over the next while. But really the main focus was on 2 things, and it was pretty simplistic. It was actually hard to get to the simplistic part, but we did, which was, it was about consultation with public safety being the most important thing, and ensuring, you know, the PSAC's leadership and the involvement of millions of first responders. We literally got responses representing, I think, more than 2 million public safety responses to our consultation, both in writing and in person. And then a procurement, and that procurement is what you just mentioned, that procurement was driven by the objectives that came out of public safety. Those 16 public safety objectives for the network are what defined what the network was going to be. And then we put that out to industry and created a competition that was a full and open competition to drive who was going to, you know, build, operate, maintain that network for the next 25 years, of which we're about 3 years into it today. One of the things during that time, though, that I think was so interesting is there was always this thing hanging over our head. And it's what I was thinking about as we were getting ready to talk today. And it was my fear anyway, and I think many others had this, that we needed to get this network in place very quickly and have it be the best network it can be because of everyday calls that happen 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And just having that operable communications for every agency that different disciplines, police, fire, and EMS, and so forth, can always communicate, but also different jurisdictions, federal, state, and local. And then to be prepared to handle the known regional emergencies we always have. Wildland fires, hurricanes, tornadoes, flooding, happens all across the country every year. There are certain parts of the country that are harder hit than others. But there was this fear in the back of our minds that there would be a national disaster, a nationwide disaster, something that was bigger. And we could never predict what that was, right? We didn't know if that was going to be another 9/11 kind of event, whether it was going to be a pandemic. But here we are. We're in the middle, I'd say probably the middle of the first wave of a pandemic, bigger than any of us have seen in our lifetimes. And I couldn't be more proud of the work that you and so many in public safety did, and we were lucky enough to be a part of, to acquire the funding, acquire the spectrum, create the plan, get the input from public safety to build their network for them. And that it was built and deployed before many wildfires and hurricanes and other things it's been used for over the last couple of years. But most importantly, as we get to this pandemic, it's just here and it works. And I just wanted to get your thoughts on that, because to me, this is probably one of the most influential and consequential moments for you in seeing the fruits of all your hard work.